Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I don't get a chance to come out from San Francisco that often. It's my first time in Ann Arbor, so thank you very much for everybody coming out. We look forward to a long, fruitful partnership with the university on this project, and it's something that, as Mark Gershwin said, has been going on now since before the millennium. So the fact that it's finally where it is, and it's now where it is physically with such a great university, and we really appreciate that, and the care that we know that the university is going to put into this project, we couldn't be happier with that, so thank you for that.
The feeling is mutual.
So I work for the Ira Gershwin estate, which was has been housed in California since Ira and George moved to California temporarily in 1936 to write for RKO Pictures. But when George died unexpectedly in 1937, Ira liked California so much that he stayed, he and his wife stayed. They bought the house that was next door to the house that they lived in with George in Beverly Hills. And it was the house that Ira stayed in until his death in 1983, and Mrs. Gershwin stayed in until her death in 1991. The house is still there. It's owned by somebody else these days. The archive, which Ira collected over the years, stayed with him, but as has been said, much of it over the years went to the Library of Congress to build up the Gershwin collection there. But under the terms of Mrs. Gershwin's, the trusts that were set up before her death, some of it would remain in San Francisco as a West Coast archive. And so in Beverly Hills, and for the last decade and a half or so in San Francisco, we had the San Francisco collection, which was transferred to the Library of Congress a couple of years ago, so now the whole thing is together, and Loris and his fellow music specialists are working madly hard to see what we've actually given them. But so when Mark asked me to talk about what I've learned from George and Ira, I am not a musicologist, I'm not a performer, I'm not a member of the family, so I come to it from an archival background, and so my work is with the actual documents, the things that George and Ira have left us, physical proof of the work that they did. George's manuscripts, Ira's lyrical manuscripts, all the ephemera that Ira kept over the years that marked their correspondence, their business papers, things like that, where you can trace how they got from point A to point B, or hopefully somebody can trace how they got from point A to point B if they did the research with those papers. And I've been doing this job now since 2005. Before that, I worked for the Trust in another capacity. And so I had a lot of time in San Francisco because I was the only person who had 24/7 access to these documents, except for the researchers who would come in, like Professor Crawford, who I saw a number of times over the years, to actually sit down and pore over these things from, I'm also a historian, so I have that background, but to look at the papers and say, wow, I didn't realize this, or this is how this happened. And yes, there's been a wealth of writings about George and Ira Gershwin since they began their work, but there are still things to be found out, and I think that's one of the things that we will discover, and we hope to discover through this, is that there are still areas, particularly with some of the shows that are obscure, that have not been restored or have not been performed since they had their debut and closed on Broadway back in the 30s. So there is still a lot to learn, and there are a lot of aspects to learn from the documents. And the one thing I thought I'd bring up is this one document that I came across recently. We recently acquired a collection from a man named Lawrence Stewart, who was Ira Gershwin's assistant and archivist, and he was one of the first people to arrange Ira's archive during the 1950s. And Lawrence passed away a few months ago and left us his Gershwin papers, and it turned out to be something like 40 to 50 boxes of material that he had collected over the years. Material from his record collection, which wasn't always Gershwin, to actual Gershwin manuscripts of George and Ira. And one of the things I came across in beginning to process this catalog was something that reminded me of the process that's involved in getting a song from your idea to its final stage, and how it isn't always what you think it's going to be when you start working on it. Now, one of the things that I found in its own little manila envelope was the only known holograph that's handwritten manuscript of Ira Gershwin's lyrics to Someone to Watch Over Me. There are typed lyrics, but this is the only handwritten lyric. And what I discovered in looking at it was that the song originally Ira wrote in his own book. He said that the song originally was in a fast pace. We all know the song, it's a slow ballad, lovely ballad. But it was originally intended as perhaps a dance number for the ensemble, and so it was fast and it was jazzy, and he thought, well, maybe I would write it like that. But then the tune slowed down. Well, on this piece of paper, there was something else which might have hinted that Ira did actually write the lyric that wasn't as romantic as the one we all know. So we know the lines. There's somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out to be. But what if that next line was something a little less than what we thought it was? What if the last line was the not so romantic, someone who'll pay the bills? So on that note, that told me that this little document showed it's got scribblings all over it of various rhymes and various lyrics, that the care that Ira took to match his words to the tunes that his brother so easily came up with, and that he could turn on a dime from something that was fast and humorous to something that was romantic and lovely. And that, I think, is just one of the examples of some of the things that the people who are going to work on the initiative and the critical edition might find inside all these boxes of material that the Library of Congress has, that other institutions have, that we can learn more about what they did and how they did it.
Great, thanks.